It's your fault my salary has decreased. That's because your earnings are too poor, and it's putting a bigger burden on me. I'm working hard too. You don't have to say it like that. Just thinking about spending money on you makes me lose my motivation to work. It was you who said you would pay for the living expenses. My husband is supposed to contribute a fixed amount for living expenses from his salary every month. However, recently he has become quite reluctant to do so. I am Emily, 32 years old. My husband is a year older than me, and we got married 5 years ago. We met at a mixer I reluctantly attended at the invitation of a friend. Normally, I wouldn't go, but that time, a girl who was supposed to go couldn't make it at the last minute, so I was begged to fill in. Naturally, I'm not fond of such places and, as expected, felt out of place there, regretting going. The person who spoke to me, feeling incredibly uncomfortable, was Tom, who would become my husband. His approach felt like a godsend, leading to our relationship and eventually marriage. Upon getting married, we bought a house and started living there. Tom has a younger sister, Catherine, 5 years his junior, who was single when we married but got married 3 years ago to a senior from her college days, whom she reconnected with at a friend's wedding. Catherine and her husband Steve live in a rental. Recently, they seem to be looking to buy a house, searching various properties. Tom and his sister are close, often talking on the phone until late at night. As a result, Catherine and her husband frequently visit our house, especially on weekends. They come over from the afternoon and lazily spend time drinking and eating. This has become more frequent, now happening almost every weekend. Emily, there's no more beer. You've been drinking since noon, so we're all out. Then go buy some. Do you not understand that without being told? What an inconsiderate wife. Aren't you drinking too much? It's fine since I'm drinking at home. Don't complain about every little thing. Come on, Emily. Since my brother says so, why don't you go shopping? And buy some ice cream too. I feel like eating something cold. Oh, that sounds good, I want some too. So, Emily, please get some for me as well. Both Catherine and Steve, following Tom's lead, cheerfully ask me to buy various things. And even when I'm being ordered around by Catherine and Steve, my husband says nothing. He just laughs and watches. Catherine and Steve come to our house, eat and drink a lot, and even rummage through the fridge before they leave. I might understand if they contributed a little towards the groceries, but I haven't received a penny from them, nor have they ever brought any gifts. This situation is putting our household finances at risk, and I'm far from okay with it. Before complaining about my earnings, I wish they would address this issue. Tom, if you're going to complain about me spending too much on living expenses, you should at least ask Catherine and her husband to chip in a bit if they're going to eat and drink here. Or, ask them to visit less often. I'm the big brother. There's no way I can say something so stingy. Every time they come, they want this or that, asking for luxuries. We can't keep up like this. Dealing with that is your job. As a wife, you should be able to handle it. That's what being supportive means. Complaining to my husband gets me nowhere. With this situation, saving money is out of the question. And we're barely making it through each day. Lately, they've even started staying over, leaving the lights, TV, and air conditioning on late into the night. The utility bills are no joke. But it must be nice for Tom owning his home. We want to have our own place soon too. That's why we're living frugally. Exactly, that's why we come here every week. Seeing your ugly face brings me down, but it helps save on food expenses. Excuse me? Can't be helped. It's for you guys to buy a house, so as the older brother, I guess I have to support you. Wait a minute. That's great, Tom. We really appreciate it. Don't mention it. Not great at all. Why should our household have to support Catherine and Steve in saving for their house? I might have been willing to compromise if they showed any humility. But I can't believe my husband laughs off their disrespectful behavior towards his wife. It's troubling that he cares more about his sister than his own wife. But talking to my husband gets me nowhere. As I was stewing over these thoughts, my husband suddenly came up with a ridiculous idea. I've come up with a great idea. What? It's the best solution for you and me to have an easier life. And for my sister and her husband to live peacefully in the future. His smug expression made me hope he finally understood my struggles. But of course, my simple-minded husband wouldn't think of anything useful. And my faint hope was quickly dashed. I've decided to sell our house to Catherine and Steve. What? How about that? It's a good idea, right? That way, we get money, and my sister gets a house. You should be happy with that. Give me a break. As if I would agree to such a thing. I'm utterly dumbfounded by my husband's unrealistic proposal. Where did such an idea even come from? The main reason our life is difficult is because Catherine and Steve come over, eat our food, and leave a mess. Without that, we could live a much better, or rather, a normal life. I wonder what's going on in his head. What's the matter? I finally come up with a great idea and you oppose it? Of course, I do. What a cheeky wife, opposing what her husband says. I've already decided. No matter what you say, I'm selling this house to my sister and her husband. Stop it. I'm absolutely against that idea. I said my piece and walked away from my husband. I couldn't stand to entertain such a ridiculous conversation any longer. I thought that if I didn't engage with it, this nonsense would eventually blow over. But one day, when I came home from work, my husband was grinning ear to ear, flaunting a stack of cash. 3 bundles of cash, each with a band around it. Emily, check this out. It's $20,000, amazing, right? What's with that money? It's not dirty money, is it? Don't say something stupid, this is legitimate income. A legitimate income? I sold the house to my sister and her husband. What? $20,000. Does that mean he received a down payment? It must be, as there's no other way he'd have this kind of money. My husband is the type to spend money as soon as he gets it, and is absolutely incapable of saving. So, there's no way he could have $20,000. That means he really did sell the house to Catherine and Steve, as he said. What are you talking about? I opposed it, remember? Return that money right now. That's impossible. They're totally set on it and are already happy and preparing to move in. What are you talking about? Where are we supposed to live then? I'm the eldest son, after all. I was thinking we'd move back to my parents' house. This is the first I'm hearing about this. And what do your parents say? When we got married, Tom's parents said they had their own plans for their old age and told us not to worry about them. They also mentioned they had no intentions of living with us and wanted us to live happily as a couple. I thought they were great parents. Of course, even though they said that, I intended to take care of them if needed, and I wasn't opposed to living together. But I can't accept the fact that my husband sold the house we bought together to his sister and her husband, and decided on his own that we would move in with his parents. My parents will be thrilled, for sure. So, you haven't talked to them yet. Don't decide things about living together or our house on your own. I don't agree to this at all. Shut up. I've made the decision. If you oppose me, it's divorce. After that, no matter what I said, my husband only responded with a shut up. Moreover, I found out that the $20,000 wasn't a deposit but the full payment for the house. Who sells a house they bought for $230,000 just 5 years ago for $20,000? However, my company entered a busy period, and I started working overtime every day, leaving no time to have a proper conversation. Whenever I came home, my husband would either be pretending to sleep or wouldn't respond to me at all. And then, I had to go on a business trip over the weekend. When I told my husband about the trip, he seemed unusually happy. But I thought we could talk about the house after I returned, as work would have calmed down by then. So, I left. 3 days later, when I returned home, I was shocked. My belongings were thrown outside the house. What on earth is going on? I tried to enter, but my key didn't work. I tried contacting my husband, but couldn't reach him. However, I could sense someone inside, so I kept ringing the doorbell. Eventually, Catherine reluctantly showed her face. "You're so noisy." "Oh, it's you, Emily. What are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that. What's going on? Why are my belongings outside? We moved in here, and your stuff was in the way, making it impossible for our things to fit. It looked like junk anyway, so I put it outside." "What do you mean by that? And it seems my key doesn't work. You heard from my brother, right? We bought this house. So, you and your stuff are in the way. Of course, we changed the locks. We don't want strangers coming in." "Strangers? We're hardly strangers, are we?" "Of course, you're strangers." "Oh, my brother left something for you. Here, this." Saying that, Catherine handed me a piece of paper that was on the shoe cabinet. It was a divorce form, already signed by my husband. My brother said he doesn't need a wife who always opposes him. So, get out already. Understood. Saying that, Catherine laughed and slammed the door right in front of my nose. I felt as if all the strength had left my body, and I no longer had the energy to resist. I called my father, explained the situation, and asked him to pick me up. I had to gather my belongings that were thrown outside. But I didn't have the energy to take them on the train, nor did I feel like taking a taxi. As I was picking up my scattered belongings, I felt so pathetic and frustrated that tears started to spill. Whether Catherine was watching from the window or not, I could hear her laughter from inside, making me feel even more miserable. My father arrived furious, ready to storm into the house, but I stopped him. I wasn't about to let this go without a fight. But for now, I just wanted to go back to my parents' house and rest. A few days later, my ex-husband, Tom, contacted me. "Emily, have you submitted the divorce papers yet?" "Of course, I did it right away. I thought you'd make a bigger fuss and refuse to leave. But according to Catherine, you took your stuff and left immediately. After what you did, I didn't want to stay in that house. Guess taking drastic measures was the right call. It's all your fault, you know. I don't care whose fault it is anymore. But I will claim what's due to me." "What? Claim what?" "I didn't cheat or anything. I don't owe you alimony." "There might not be alimony, but there's still division of property. Though it was only 5 years, those years count. Even if we both worked and had separate finances, there's still shared property between a husband and wife. The savings accumulated during the marriage are considered shared property. Though, there wasn't much savings to speak of. I agreed to buy a house when we got married because I sensed my husband wasn't good with money. I thought owning a home and paying a mortgage would be a form of savings, rather than paying rent. It was unexpected that he would sell our house to his sister and her husband. But it seems he hasn't realized yet that such a transaction isn't straightforward. There's the house we bought after getting married. That's our shared property. What are you talking about? I told you, I sold the house to Catherine and her husband. You just sold it and took the money without any formal process, right? No official paperwork was done, was it? If I say I sold my house, isn't that proof enough? You can't sell it like that without official registry changes. And besides, you can't do that without my consent. Why not? If I agree to it, there shouldn't be a problem. Because the house is in both our names, Tom. You can't sell it on your own. What? He hadn't realized that. And it seems he's forgotten another crucial detail. I'll have to remind him, to avoid any trouble for my ex-husband later. Consider it an act of kindness. But you know, Tom is the one named on the mortgage payments. What? Mortgage? What are you talking about? I haven't been paying anything like that. Yes, up until now. Remember, we set up a special account just for the mortgage payments. Have you forgotten? I was the one putting in $1,300 from my salary every month. Huh? We decided that you would cover the living expenses, and I would pay for the mortgage. Did we? You can't just forget important things like that. But now that we're divorced, I won't be making any more payments. What do you mean from now on? It's a 15-year loan with no down payment. There are 10 years left. If you're going to live there, make sure to pay it properly. The ex-husband didn't speak for a while. Perhaps unable to process the information or maybe calculating the remaining amount. Did he seriously think a house transaction could be settled just by handing over cash? And to think the house sold for only $20,000. What kind of family discount was that? He must have been blinded by the immediate cash. Finally, as if he had done the math, the ex-husband exclaimed something obvious. 10 more years? That means there's almost $170,000 left to pay? I have to pay that? Looks like it. Then there's no profit at all. I only got $20,000 from Catherine and her husband for the house. You're telling me, just for that, I have to pay $1,300 every month for another 10 years? That's very generous of you, big brother. Selling it for less than a tenth of the amount. The husband was at a loss for words. He seemed to have finally faced reality. It's obvious the purchase price of the house wasn't $20,000. But it took this long for him to realize, wondering what kind of thought process he has. So, the current asset value of the house minus the remaining loan balance will be subject to property division, and that's my part. Make sure to pay it properly. Wait a minute. So, you're saying I have to pay even more, on top of the loan? Well, that's the situation. Thanks. Afterward, the ex-husband insisted that he wouldn't hand over the house unless his sister and her husband paid an additional $200,000, inevitably souring the once good relationship between them. Catherine and Steve claimed they had bought the house. And Tom, realizing too late that selling the house for $20,000 was absurd, got into a huge fight. Tom vaguely remembered that while he was responsible for the living expenses, I was supposed to pay for the house. However, the idea that the mortgage was still being paid had slipped his mind entirely. He somehow thought I had paid off the entire amount already, and considered himself lucky to have gotten the $20,000. Tom said you paid off the house in full, so there's no problem. He doesn't care how much he sells it for since it doesn't hurt his wallet. And I wasn't told it was in both your names. That's what Catherine accused me of over the phone. Finally shedding light on the ex-husband's foolishness. But that wasn't my concern. I hired a lawyer to properly assess the house's asset value, and made a claim for property division from my ex-husband. Tom, in tears, begged me to let it go or return and live together until the mortgage payments were finished if that was impossible. I firmly refused. Eventually, unable to afford the monthly payments or the property division settlement, and having already spent the $20,000 received from Catherine and Steve, he had to let go of the house. It turned out he had a significant amount of debt, likely from gambling. With Catherine and Steve initially thrilled to get a house for $20,000. Their rage was inevitable when they ended up severing ties with the ex-husband. To me, both parties were to blame for thinking a 2-story, 3 LDK house, only 5 years old, could be bought for $20,000. I left all the sales proceedings and the subsequent property division to my lawyer, which was smoothly handled. Hearing about the whole ordeal, Tom's parents were furious and insisted that the money from the house sale, after deductions, should be paid to me as compensation. They even came to my parents' house to apologize and hand over the money, which I graciously accepted. Tom, still overwhelmed by debt and living marginally, sought help from his parents, who turned him away. Catherine and Steve, too, found themselves in financial distress and considered moving in with her parents but were flatly refused. They ended up arguing in front of her parents, blaming each other for the lost $20,000. It seems Tom still hasn't repaid the money to Catherine and Steve. Tom's parents felt deeply ashamed of the entire situation. Now, I commute from my parents' house to work. Free from worries, I've been able to focus on my job, and I've even been promoted, with a significant amount of money returned and distancing myself from troublesome people. I have no complaints. I plan to continue working hard for the foreseeable future.